खुद मेरी जिंदगी का यह बहुत मार्मिक क्षण है। राजीव गांधी जी का सपना अभी तक आधा ही पूरा हुआ है। इस बिल के पारित होने के साथ ही वह पूरा होगा।
28th Amendment Bill 23. Sir, I stand on behalf of the Nationalist Congress Party in full support of this bill.
They said that they have to involve all stakeholders, political parties, and then build a consensus before bringing the bill. I'd like to know what consensus was built, what discussions were held.
This is not the historic bill that it is being touted as. It is a sham. And for the women and the men and the girls and the boys who will be the future women and men of India, we had better recognize this because it is staring at us in the face.
जब ये अधिनियम लागू होगा तब के बाद 15 वर्षों तक महिलाओं को रिजर्वेशन गारंटी करती है, मोदी की गारंटी है।
Strong words there coming from opposition leaders on the Women's Reservation Bill. Hello and welcome to News Centre. I'm Parikshit Luthra. The opposition is questioning the government's intention on the Women's Reservation Bill, asking why has it been linked to the delimitation process after the next census. The India Alliance is seeking immediate implementation of the bill. Now, why is this clause so contentious? The term delimitation means a process of fixing limits or boundaries of a legislative constituency. It is carried out by a delimitation or boundary commission. It is ordered by an act of parliament. Delimitation takes place after every census, and the last census was in the year 2001. Now, when has delimitation actually taken place in the past? Well, it's taken place 4 times in the past by the Delimitation Commission Act of 1952, 1963, 1973, and 2002. However, the report of the 2002 Delimitation Commission remains on paper. That is because the 84th and 87th Constitutional Amendment had frozen Lok Sabha seat reallocation based on the 2001 census till 2026. The powers of the Delimitation Commission, well, it is headed by a retired Supreme Court judge. Orders of the Delimitation Commission have the force of law. They cannot be questioned by any court. No modification is permissible by the Lok Sabha and state assemblies as well. Now, how does this really impact the timeline for the Women's Reservation Bill, is what you would be thinking. Well, the bill says the law will take effect only after the delimitation exercise following the next census is over. So, no question of implementation till 2026 at least. Because as per the constitutional amendment, seats allocated to states based on the 1971 census will remain unaltered till the first census after 2026. So what about the next census? The census process was supposed to take place in 2021 but got postponed due to COVID-19. Work on the next census is likely to begin in late 2024 or even early 2025, and this will be a digital one. How the next census will be done is not very clear yet. The procedure has to be done. The next census results could be published only after 2026, sometime in 2027. So how does this affect the implementation of the Women's Reservation Bill? Well, firstly, the census has to be published after 2026. Secondly, the Parliament has to approve a Delimitation Act after the census. Thirdly, the Delimitation Commission has to submit a report. And fourthly, the last Delimitation Commission in 2002 began work in 2004 and took 3 years to submit its report. Now, going by this timeline, the effective implementation of the Women's Reservation Bill may easily be postponed and may happen only after 2029 or 2030. So, a lot of questions there for the government. Joining us now is Sangita Reddy, Joint Managing Director of Apollo Hospitals, Flavia Agnes, lawyer and women's rights activist, also with us here on the program. Sangita Reddy, of course, there are a lot of questions about the Women's Reservation Bill, but how do you think this moment is for the country? Do you feel this is too little, too late, or a welcome move nevertheless? You're on mute, ma'am. Miss Reddy, you're on mute.
Sorry. So, like I said, undoubtedly, I believe that equity is a critical aspect of the progress of any country and the world itself. And in a democracy, representation is such a vital principle. More than that, I think it's also like the bedrock of good governance. And gender gap between men and women in the political representation has been not only significant but persistent over time. So I believe this is a good, positive step. I also want to say that over the last 20 years, 17 countries have legislated reservation for women, and almost 44 countries legislated quotas. But more importantly, there's a growing evidence in literature to show that reservation has improved women's representation and overall economic, social, and advancement of women in every sphere. So I believe this is a very positive step. I also believe that everyone will appreciate the fact that it's critical for women and will come forward because it's also critical for the country at large, not just for women in the country, but for men and children and everybody. So I think it's a historic moment, and I hope that the progression of implementation of this also moves smoothly and effectively to achieve the purpose for which it's intended.
All right. So you hope that it is smoothly implemented soon. But let me go across to Flavia, Agnes as well. Miss Agnes, what do you think about some of the clauses of the bill? One clause that struck us and is something that the opposition is also asking is, why does the bill say as nearly as maybe 1/3 of seats may be reserved? Does this say, does this mean up to 1/3, or does this mean yes, 1/3 will be reserved?
Well, on the face of it, it looks like 1/3 will be reserved. But I'm not sure with this government what will happen next. Now, here, many opposition parties have dubbed it as a sham bill because of 2 or 3 very vital reasons. While there's a lot of hype about it, the bill being introduced, etc., it cannot be implemented immediately. It will, at the best, it might be implemented in 2029 election. At 2024, it will not be. And the next election is M29. This is because the census will take place not before 2026. Our census report will come out not before 2026. It may take place in 2025, and then the reports have to be published, and then the whole task of delimitation will take place, and only after this bill will take effect. And by the time it is finalized and we're ready for it, it will be 2029. Then there is the delimitation clause. It's got a validity of 15 years. It is passed now, which means it will start now. And then it will be valid for 15 years. But it will not come into effect till 2029. So effectively, how long will it be in action, in implementation stage? So that is not very clear. And the third, which opposition has raised very eloquently, is that there's no reservation for OBCs, and there's no reservation for minorities, and that, of course, nobody is talking about. So these are very vital points, and the opposition is seeking clarity on this.
Right.
So if a bill is passed without all these protective measures, will it really have impact? And to what extent? While I agree it is a positive step ahead.
Those are some important questions.
I don't think it is it's sufficient.
Those are very important questions being raised by you, ma'am. Let me also go across to Sangita, Reddy at this point. Some valid questions being raised by Ms. Agnes. Do you also feel that it would have been better if this bill had come into effect immediately after passage in the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, Ms. Reddy?
So I think we're already late in the aspect of women's representation in many spheres. So the sooner is always better, but a step begun is also a step in the right direction. So I think what we need to do is to work together to enhance the implementation of the bill, to make it speedier, and see what can be done as soon as possible. I also believe that every aspect of where women have achieved a position in the political landscape, say in the panchayat, it doesn't really come into effect immediately. But slowly and surely, women in leadership at grassroots is having its impact. So what is critical now is to ensure that the bill is implemented as soon as is technically possible, considering the electoral landscape.
Ms. Reddy, what I would also like to ask you, women's reservation is something that we've now been speaking about for almost 3 decades. What more do we need to do in order to bridge the gender gap, ensure more representation of women, not just in government, but in the corporate sector and all the way to the boardrooms as well? This is a question you've been asked many times before, but as a leader, as an industry veteran, what would your recommendation be?
So clearly, I want to state that in our organization at Apollo, we do have 51% of our workforce as women. And I believe this creates for an environment for a progressive, proactive, socially and culturally and ecologically aware organization. So equity and sustainability are critical for progress. During the process of the last year, as G20 has been discussing, various aspects, and India's position of women-led development was something that the whole world appreciated. But specifically in the corporate world, what we are looking for is, of course, more women in the workspace. Towards that, you look at women-friendly environments. We look at an entire revamping and strengthening of the care economy, because the fact is that women do 2.5 times more work than men in the home front. And this anomaly needs to be corrected to enable an equalization in the workforce. We also must look at the grassroots aspect. So it's education. Up to secondary education, we have achieved almost 50% participation of women, which is great. We also are seeing that despite the fact that 43% of current students in engineering are women, in the workforce, it comes down to about 27%. So there's work to be done in keeping women in the workforce, as well as in growing this aspect of women coming into STEM education. Multiple steps are being discussed. I think India will progressively move up in its indices towards women participation in the workforce. And this, like I have often said, is not just for the women we're talking about. It's for men, women, and for a better world at large.
Right. Important points there, Ms. Reddy. But Ms. Agnes, coming to you, and again, one clause of the law which we would like to understand better. One of the first paragraphs in the bill says that 1/3 of the seats in the Delhi Assembly, which are going to be reserved for women, including for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, will be decided in a manner by Parliament. So, does this mean that the Parliament will decide which are the seats which are going to be reserved for women? A separate law will have to be brought to that effect?
I think the bill is inclusive of that. And I think the central bill will have provisions for this. What's disturbing here is the rotation. That only one, actually as the lifetime of this particular bill, if it is enacted, then what will happen is there's 1/3 reservation for the coming election, 1/3 for the one after that, and 1/3 after that. And the whole country will be covered by one-time election. After that, there's no election. After that, no reservation. So again, you have to pass another, after the delimitation, you have to pass another act to continue this reservation. So that's a very cumbersome process. And it is assumed that women will be liberated at the end of this one round of reservation, and they will enter the parliament, they will enter the state legislature, and they will be fine after that. And there is no need. So this, according to me, is giving false hopes. It is the illusion, according to me, that women will be liberated after that. Now, if the SC and ST reservation has continued for such a long time and is still not liberated, how do we presume that women will be liberated so fast? Just with one term of reservation. So these choosing the seats and how it is done, the technicalities, I'm not sure how they're going to do it, but I presume it will be the prerogative of the center and not of the state.
All right. All right, we've run out of time, but Miss Agnes and Miss Reddy, thank you so much for joining us on this program with your thoughts on the Women's Reservation Bill. Of course, Miss Reddy, welcoming this, but there are certain questions that the government must answer, must give clarity on in the days to come. We're going to take a short break, but coming up on the other side, diplomatic standoff between India and Canada intensifies. To decode the implications, we will be joined by a strategic affairs expert, Brahma Chalane, on the other side.